Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was rinsing out a coffee mug at the kitchen sink when my phone buzzed with a late shipment alert. Typical end-of-day stuff for a logistics manager. One pallet held at the yard, another mis-scanned at the dock. Nothing dramatic. I dried my hands, set the phone face down, and turned toward the hallway where the bedroom light glowed a soft yellow. My name is Ethan Ward. I'm 38, and I run operations for a regional freight company here in Denver. By all accounts, I'm the steady guy, the one who keeps things moving, who pays attention, who fixes delays before anyone else notices them. Lately, though, the only delay I couldn't manage was happening at home. The first time I reached for her that month was a Wednesday. Not a special night or an anniversary, just a quiet midweek moment when I stepped into our room, sat at the edge of the mattress, and touched her shoulder. She didn't roll away or snap. She just went still in that practiced way people do when they're waiting for turbulence to pass. "I'm exhausted," she said, the same tone she uses when the dishwasher beeps or the dog scratches at the back door. I told her it was fine. It was. Everyone gets tired. I kissed her hair, turned off the lamp, stared at the ceiling, and listened to the faint hum of traffic on Federal. No big deal, I told myself. Tomorrow will be better. Attempt 2 came a couple days later, a Friday after we'd both made it home before dark. I grilled chicken on the patio. She poured 2 glasses of wine. We ate without phones at the table, almost a throwback to how we used to be. We cleaned up side by side. I felt that easy quiet you get when you've actually shared a day, not just crossed paths inside it. When I reached for her later, she smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. "Headache," she said, pressing fingers to her temple. I nodded, gave her water, closed the blinds. She scrolled through something on her screen for 20 minutes after that, face lit blue. I lay on my back and tried to name the brand of perfume she wore these days. It wasn't the one I'd bought for her birthday. The third time was a week after that, on a Saturday night. We were invited to a co-worker's birthday downtown, and she took a long shower, blow-dried her hair, did the full face. I watched her in the hallway mirror as she clipped on small gold hoops. They suited her. She looked good, sharp, bright, taller somehow. At the bar, she laughed loud at a story she'd heard before. A guy from her marketing team hugged her a beat too long and called her kiddo, which annoyed me more than it should have. We left early. In the car, she rolled down the window and let the cold air slap the last of the gin from her cheeks. Back at home, I reached for her carefully, like I was moving a fragile vase from one shelf to another. She sighed and said, "I'm just not there tonight, okay?" The tonight felt important, like a promise that had an exit clause built in. I said sure, kissed her forehead, and set my alarm for 5:30 because the yard runs heavy on Sundays. By then I'd begun to notice the patterns you only catch when your mind is clear and your pride is quiet. The new blazer she wore to work twice in 1 week. The gym bag that reappeared after a year in the closet. The way she'd reapply lip balm at red lights. None of it is evidence. It's just texture. But texture adds up. And it added up to a feeling I didn't like admitting. I was the only person watching us closely. She spoke in quick, floaty sentences about meetings and deadlines and how busy season isn't just yours, you know. And I said I understood. I do understand. I manage busy seasons for a living. The truth is, I can tell the difference between a bottleneck and neglect. Attempt 4 came 3 weeks after the first one. It was a Sunday afternoon, snow half melted along the curb, the Broncos getting leveled on TV. She was on the couch under a blanket, absent-mindedly petting the dog with one hand while doom-scrolling with the other. I nudged her foot and said, "How about we go upstairs?" It was casual, not needy. "I've got to be up early," she said. It was Sunday. She always has to be up early on Mondays, and for years that never stopped us from being married on Sunday nights. The dog thumped his tail 3 times against the cushion. I muted the TV to hear her better, as if clarity were hiding in the quiet. It wasn't. I don't do speeches, and I don't set ultimatums. But I started counting, not on paper, just in my head. Not 30 nights, not even 10. 5 attempts at human closeness across a month that should have held a handful of easy moments. I never made it a campaign. I never made a calendar. I simply tried when it seemed right, and each time she placed another small stone on the scale. Tired. Busy. Headache. Not tonight. Early morning. Taken alone, each stone is nothing. Together, They begin to look like the wall you build when you don't want to say what's on the other side. In between, other little things moved. She started stepping into the hallway to take evening calls. She switched the passcode on her phone and then, later, set Face ID and laughed that it was safer. She bought a lipstick that left a faint coral halo on her coffee mug in the morning. When I asked where she got it, she said, "It was in a gift bag at work." I nodded. I've carried enough gift bags out to recycling to know what swag looks like. Attempt 5 wasn't even a full ask. It was a hand on her back while she brushed her teeth, the simple warmth of skin that used to belong to us without discussion. She looked at me in the mirror and waited for the question. I stepped back, gave her the sink, folded a towel, put it on the rack the way she likes it. Edges even, tag tucked. She rinsed, dabbed her mouth, and slid past me into the bedroom. Later, when I lay on my side of the bed with the covers pulled to my chest, she turned off her lamp and said into the dark, almost playfully, "Finally, you're learning." I watched the numbers shift on the digital clock and let my mind do what it does best, organize. I thought about the weeks behind us and the trail of little changes she'd left unintentionally. New routines, new smells, new habits, and all of them pointing away from me. I thought about the way she'd begun to treat me like the soft part of the couch, comfortable, unnoticed until it's gone. I thought about my own part in it, whether I'd let work swallow more of me than I realized, whether I'd ignored signs because steady men prefer steady stories. Around midnight, I got up to drink a glass of water and stood in the kitchen looking at the dark window. Our reflection hovered there, me in boxers and a t-shirt, the quiet outline of a life I'd worked hard to make predictable. I opened the cabinet and saw the travel mug she used to steal from me in the mornings. I considered throwing it out and then laughed at myself. I'm not the guy who smashes mugs. I collected the mail, stacked it neatly, and put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Small, boring acts. Acts that felt like anchoring. The next morning she was cheerful, almost buoyant, whistling while she looked for her keys. "Busy day," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. I said, "Me too," and grabbed my lunch from the fridge. We walked to the door together. She liked her new heels. I could tell by the way she paused to check the line of her pants. I held the door. She stepped through, and the dog sighed dramatically like he always does when we both leave. On the drive to the yard, I took Federal again, past the same diners, the same muffler shops, the same morning people carrying coffees and plans. The ordinary looked extra sharp. That's what happens right before a break. You start seeing everything you've built in high resolution. I didn't decide anything in that moment. Decisions like that deserve a cool head and a straight back. But the map inside me shifted a few inches to the left. I felt it. The night before had been my last attempt, and I hadn't even completed the question. She was right about one thing. I was learning. What I was learning, she didn't yet understand. The week after that last attempt moved along like a conveyor belt. Same streets, same coffee, same meetings about dwell time and crosstalk errors. Inside the house, though, something in the air had hardened. She moved around me with an ease that felt practiced, like she'd rehearsed a life where I was furniture and finally nailed the blocking. I matched her calm. I kept the kitchen clean, hit my workouts, returned calls on time. If she wanted me quieter, I could give her quiet with precision. Small tells multiplied. She started leaving for work earlier than the traffic warranted, hair set, a crisp line of eyeliner I hadn't seen since our first years. Her gym bag lived by the door again, but she never came home sweaty. Perfume lingered in the hallway half an hour after she was gone, the kind that arrives before a person and stays after. At night, she took her phone to the bathroom and locked the door. I logged it and let it pass. A man in my job learns to tell the difference between spikes and trend lines. This was a trend line. Tuesday, just after lunch, my screen lit up with a message from a buddy who works a block off Colfax. Not a close friend, more like a decent guy who's seen enough to know when to keep his mouth shut. The text was simple, might be nothing. Thought you'd want a heads up. He'd attached a photo. A patio table. Late sun. 2 glasses with the last ice diamonds melting. Her profile in 3/4 view, head tilted, smiling with the kind of attention that starts in the eyes. The man across from her leaned in, elbow hooked over the back of his chair like he'd been there before. Beard trimmed close. Baseball cap, shadowing a face I recognized from the version of her life that existed before me. David. The image wasn't lurid. No kissing, no hands where they shouldn't be. Just a familiarity that doesn't grow in a week. I stared at it long enough for the phone to dim and then tapped it awake again, zooming in until pixels broke apart like sand. His thumb on the rim of her glass. Her knee angled toward him, not away. The tiny crease near her, as she gets when she's listening like the world has fallen away. I remembered the first time I'd heard his name years ago, the way her voice went neutral, like describing an old apartment. Useful once, now a memory. They'd dated on and off through their 20s, broke up because timing was wrong, or jobs were wrong, or families were wrong. Whatever the reason, he'd been a chapter she never reread. Or so I believed. Everything rearranged in a click. The new lipstick. The early mornings. The hallway phone calls followed by the polite smile, like we were office mates. A system with inputs and outputs. You can get used to the dark if you tell yourself the lights will come back on. Seeing that photo was someone flipping the switch. I finished my shift, signed off on 2 pallets, and took Federal home with the radio low. The dog met me with his typical full-body wag. I scratched his ears and washed my hands longer than necessary. She came in an hour later, breezy and bright, chatting about a deadline that had moved and a client who just doesn't get it. I cooked pasta. She opened a bottle of red and poured heavy like we were celebrating nothing in particular. We ate at the island. The faucet dripped once. Twice. The dog thumped his tail underneath my stool. I let 2 minutes pass, then 2 more. I looked up and asked the first question as if I were confirming a delivery window. Is there someone else? A tight little laugh, the kind people give when a waiter cracks the safest joke on the menu. You sound insecure. The word hung there like a code on a hook. I didn't reach for it. I looked at her face the way I look at bill of lading numbers, patiently, as if a digit might shift and show me the truth. Is there someone else? An exaggerated breath. We're adults. This jealousy is exhausting. I sipped water and let the noise of the refrigerator motor fill the space. When it clicked off, the kitchen went quiet enough to hear the bottle settle against the cork coaster. I set my glass down and asked the second question, simple and precise, the way you'd ask a colleague if a shipment cleared customs. How's David? The name did what 100 arguments couldn't. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The muscles along her jaw tightened, then let go. Eyes flicked left, right, as if the room had shifted an inch and she needed to find her balance. The air changed temperature by a single, unmistakable degree. No words. Just that small inventory of tells the body reveals when the floor has given way by half an inch. Nothing dramatic followed. She set the fork down with care, lined it parallel to the knife, and reached for her wine with a hand that didn't quite steady on the first try. She took a sip, then another, and smiled a practiced smile that belonged to a different room, a different conversation, a different man. Who sent you on this little mission? I shook my head. I wasn't on a mission. Missions have objectives and timelines. This was a checkpoint. It passed, or it didn't. You've looked happier lately, I said. New lipstick. New energy. I didn't make a speech. I let the truth sit between us without props. She rolled her shoulders once, like a dancer resetting. I've been focusing on me. I like myself better this way. I remembered the patio photo and the angle of her knee. Focus takes many forms. I nodded as if we'd covered the minutes from the last meeting and could adjourn. We finished eating. I rinsed plates. She wiped the counter in slow, even strokes that left the surface bone dry. In bed that night, she lay on her side, phone dark, back an unspoken line down the center of us. I stayed awake a few beats longer than usual, counting breaths, matching the dog's soft snore from the corner. The question had done its work. Her reaction had done the rest. Clarity isn't always a thunderclap. Sometimes it's a ledger balancing on its own. The days that followed kept their shape. She scheduled a girls' dinner that ended later than dinners do. A new blazer appeared, navy, sharp shoulders, the kind you buy when you want to feel edges. A message popped on her lock screen while she reached for a pan. A first name and a heart she hadn't switched off in her settings, gone in a thumb's blur. She tried small prods, the kind that test whether you're still on the hook. You've been calmer. A tilt of the head, assessing. See? We don't need to make everything a thing. A pat on my shoulder in the hallway, like a coach acknowledging a player who stayed in his lane. I let the comments pass the way you let a summer storm pass. Windows closed, lights on, knowing the air will smell different when it's done. Twice I almost told the story about the photo. In scenes I imagined and discarded, the printed picture on the counter, the measured explanation, the conversation about how we got here. But the version of us that had those conversations had been gone for a while. What remained was logistics. What's moving where, who's paying for which lane, how much time until the next handoff. I don't mind logistics. I understand them. And I could feel a handoff coming. On Thursday, she came home humming a song from the early 2000s, something I'd heard on the radio when I still changed my own brake pads on Saturdays. She set her purse down and stretched in a way that made the new blazer pull neat lines across her back. "We should do something this weekend," floated into the room, light as the steam from the pot on the stove. A trial balloon. I watched it rise and didn't reach to catch it. The dog looked from her to me and wagged without picking a side. That night, while she showered, I stood in the doorway and studied the closet like it was a map. Her suitcase sat upright behind a row of dresses, zipper tabs aligned. I'd always thought that was a habit of preparedness, the way some people keep their gas tank half full. Now it looked like readiness. I closed the door softly and brushed my teeth in the hall bath. When she came out, towel-wrapped, she gave me that light, "Please smile" women wear when they're convincing themselves a choice is still a secret. I returned it with something gentler, neutrality. We lay in the dark, the dog doing his circle once, twice, and settling. I didn't reach for her. The question had been asked. The answer had been given without language. Around midnight, a new calm found me, the kind you get when your hands are finally off a wheel that's not connected to anything. I listened to the house breathe, to the city beyond it hum in its winter way, and I understood exactly what my next move would be. Not tonight. A simple correction of course, executed cleanly, at speed, with paperwork to follow. Her earlier line came back to me, that sing-song little verdict in the dark. Finally, you're learning. She wasn't wrong. I had learned. And the lesson was simple. When someone treats your presence like ambient noise, the quietest thing you can do is remove the sound. Clarity has a sound. For me, it was the refrigerator motor kicking off after I said David's name and watched her face do that small, involuntary math. I slept a short, clean sleep and woke before the alarm, steady in a way I hadn't felt in months. No rehearsed speeches, just a list. I showered, dressed, and pulled the fireproof envelope from the top shelf in the closet. Passport, social, birth certificate, lease copy, a folder of pay stubs. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee, fed the dog, and opened my laptop at the island. HR first, split direct deposit, new primary account. Bank next, freeze the joint card, remove an authorized user, open a separate checking, and set my payday transfer to hit there. Utilities, confirm which ones were in my name and schedule cancellations with a 30-day notice. None of it felt dramatic. It was logistics. I've moved freight through snowstorms with less planning. I booked a month-to-month rental near the yard, keyless entry, furnished, clean. 1 month, paid up front. I unlocked a P.O. box, set mail forwarding, and took photos of everything I changed so I wouldn't wonder later if I'd imagined it. By 8:30, I was at my desk, knocking out the usual, a vendor call, a reslotting request, 2 safety forms. A man can get a lot done when he stops arguing with a reality that has already arrived. At lunch, I stepped into a quiet conference room and called a lawyer a buddy had recommended when his own marriage cratered last year. The man answered on the second ring, voiced like someone who's seen every version of this. We covered basics. No kids. Shorter marriage than most. Separate retirement accounts. A rented place on a lease that could be assigned. I emailed him the photo, because documentation spares you from narratives. He told me what I already knew. Proof doesn't heal anything. It just organizes the file. He drafted a separation agreement while we were on the phone and scheduled a signing for Friday. Retainer paid. Calendar invite set. I stood at the window and watched a row of trailers back into their bays like they were tracing lines I'd drawn. Her text started around 2. Where are you? This is childish. We should talk. I silenced the thread and finished my shift. On the way home, I stopped by the leasing office. The manager, a practical woman who prints everything, looked up my unit. Month-to-month renewal had rolled over in January. Clean. I handed her a written 30-day notice ending my tenancy and requested assignment rights to the remaining occupant. She nodded, stapled the form, and said she'd need her signature to keep the place. I said she'd have it if she wanted it. Either way, my last rent payment would be the one already scheduled. The math was simple enough for both of us. Back at the house, I parked on the street, not in the driveway like I usually do. I took my duffel and that fireproof envelope and nothing else. No pettiness. The dog trotted over, hopeful for a walk, and I knelt to scratch the soft spot behind his ear. He looked at me the way he always does, present, uncomplicated. I told him he was a good boy. He is. He would be fine either way. She was at the island with her laptop open, hair still damp, wearing that new blazer like a uniform. The air held the soap she likes after her evening showers, the one that used to mean bed. She glanced at the duffel first, then at me. Where are you going? The temptation to explain everything in a paragraph rose and passed. Explanations are for people who don't know what they're doing. I set the envelope on the counter and met her eyes. By the end of the week, I said, the divorce papers will be ready. She laughed too quickly. Be serious. I am. I've given the landlord my notice. You can assume the lease if you want it. Invite David. You don't have to hide anymore. I won't be paying rent after this month. There it was. Just terms. She stood very still, like a deer deciding whether the shape in the trees is a person or just wind. Then came the routine performance. The scoff, the little head shake, the almost smile. You're overreacting. Maybe, I said, but I'm done reacting at all. She waited for the fight. When it didn't arrive, she reached for condescension like a jacket by the door. You're running away. I'm walking out. I left the spare key on the hook by the door, the way I've always hated people leaving them in movies. Visible, final, a small punctuation mark. I lifted the duffel. The dog whined once, and then quieted when I touched his head. She followed me to the doorway with her arms crossed, a posture that looks powerful until there's nothing to hold. What are you even going to tell people? She asked. The truth, I said, that I won't live in a room where respect is optional. The hallway outside our unit smelled like someone else's dinner. I locked the door behind me, walked to the elevator, and watched the numbers climb down like a countdown. In the lobby, an older couple wrestled with a package too big for the mailroom shelf. I held the door for them. It felt good to do something ordinary. At the rental, I learned the new entry code in one try. The place was stripped of history. White walls, a couch that never belonged to anyone, a table with 4 chairs no one had picked on purpose. I hung 2 shirts, folded the rest, and set the envelope in the nightstand like a compass. Then I turned my phone face up and let the messages refill the screen. 3 from her in a row. We need to talk. Stop making a scene. Where are you staying? Then another. Are you serious about this? And then the one that always arrives eventually in these situations, the one that tries to put you on the defensive. I didn't do anything wrong. I typed one reply and kept it short. Papers Friday. Landlord has your paperwork. You don't need to hide him. Please don't contact me except about logistics. Send. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. A paragraph. Then another. I put the device in a drawer and went for a walk in the cold. The sidewalks were crusted with old snow that squeaked underfoot. I breathed out and watched the air go white. For once, my head wasn't arguing with itself. I have known this feeling a few times. When a load finally clears a border after a week of calls. When a driver stuck on I-25 makes it to the ramp without incident. When a busted plan gets replaced by a better one and you can feel the line go taut and true. Back inside, I opened the laptop and confirmed every move I'd made that morning. Autopay set to end. Streaming accounts changed. Cloud storage separated. A clean exit isn't a flourish. It's the courtesy you extend to your future self. I wrote 2 emails. One to the lawyer confirming Friday's meeting, and one to the landlord authorizing her assumption of the lease. I copied her on the second and kept the language basic. Effective immediately. I won't be occupying the unit. My tenancy ends in 30 days. All financial obligations after that date are hers if she wishes to remain. Paper replaces drama the way a well-drawn map replaces getting lost. I slept well. In the morning, I made coffee in a mug that didn't belong to any memory and drove to work on a route that shaved 5 minutes from the commute. The day behaved. Forklifts beeped. People did their jobs. Around noon, I got the lawyer's packet with all the blanks filled, names, dates, a clause about marital waste neither of us needed to argue. She tried calling in the afternoon from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail and didn't listen. What I owe is to the man who keeps his word to himself when no one's clapping. By the end of the week, the papers would be ready. She could stop hiding. She could invite him over to the place I was no longer paying for. And I could return to a life where the quiet means peace instead of punishment. Before I left the yard, I texted one last line, so there wouldn't be any confusion about where this was headed. It read the way my emails to vendors read when a shipment misses twice, and we're not going to pretend a third time is the charm. I won't be back. The first 24 hours in the rental were quiet by design. I left the phone in a drawer, made coffee in a mug with no history, and walked laps around the block until my head and feet matched pace. When I finally checked the screen, the messages had stacked like pallets. Questions, accusations, explanations, a late attempt at tenderness. I kept my promise to myself, logistics only. I answered two things: confirmation of the landlord's paperwork and the time the lawyer would expect signatures. Everything else stayed unread. By mid-morning, she pivoted to certainty. You're being dramatic. Come home and talk like adults. I forwarded her the lease assumption form and wrote the only line that mattered. Please coordinate directly with the office. She replied with a paragraph about my obligation as a husband to try. I let it sit there and went back to work. Freight arrived, drivers beeped, someone scraped a pallet against a guardrail and apologized to no one. The world did not notice our marriage changing shape. On day 2, the tone shifted. The messages got softer around the edges. Memories pulled out like old quilts. That trip to Salida when the river was too cold to wade. The time the dog got sick and slept on my chest while she cried. She offered to make chili, the recipe I like with the cumin doubled. I pictured our kitchen and the island where she'd smiled through small lies and realized food wasn't going to fix what truth had broken. I sent one sentence, papers Friday. She sent 3 dots that appeared and vanished like a heartbeat on a monitor, then nothing. In the afternoon, my phone lit with an unknown number. I let it go, then read the transcript. A man informing me I'd misunderstood, that I should be a man and talk to her. I recognized the rhythm of David without needing his name. I blocked the number without answering. The dog's new schedule came through from her after that. Her polite way of saying she understood I wasn't coming back. She offered me Saturday mornings if I wanted to take him to the park. I put it on my calendar. Not everything had to be scorched. Word traveled faster than I expected. A mutual friend texted to see if I was okay, in the tone people use when they already picked a side. I sent him the patio photo and nothing else. He didn't reply. Then later he did. A simple I see. Another friend, the kind who loves conflict as entertainment, called twice. I declined both and finally texted the same 2 words I give talkative vendors. Not available. The fewer actors on stage, the shorter the play. On day 3, she came to the yard. I watched her on the lobby camera, standing straighter than usual, makeup done with the care of someone preparing for a deposition. The receptionist pinged me. I told her to give my wife the number of my attorney and that I wasn't available for unscheduled meetings. She tried again, voice rising just enough for the microphone to clip. Security asked her to wait or leave. She left. 10 minutes later, a message arrived. Unbelievable. That made 2 of us, just for different reasons. That night, she tried a different lane, flirtation dressed as nostalgia. A photo of an old note I'd left on her dashboard before we were married. A promise from a younger version of me to always come home. She added, I want that back. Wanting and honoring aren't the same thing. I typed then deleted polite words that would only invite more. In the end, I stuck to the rule that had saved me all week. Respond to plans, not feelings. We meet Friday, 11 a.m. By Thursday, she cycled to panic. Rapid-fire texts with opposite instructions. Don't do anything until we talk. If you're going to leave, then go. This is on you. You're breaking up a home over a picture. I didn't correct her that the picture only explained what her behavior had already said. I walked to the corner store and bought laundry soap I'd never used before. Back at the rental, I folded shirts in unfamiliar light and understood that clean doesn't always mean new. Sometimes it just means unshared. A colleague who knew nothing about my personal life mentioned seeing her downtown at lunch, alone, looking like she was trying to decide whether to sit or run. I nodded, changed the subject, and knocked out another lane optimization. The work had become easier. When you stop bleeding into every room, the rooms need less mopping. Thursday night, one last attempt at control came through disguised as generosity. She proposed starting over, with conditions that all equaled me returning on her terms. Therapy if I apologized first. Boundaries if I accepted her definitions. Intimacy when she felt like it, which would be later. She finished with a line that might once have moved me. I miss us. Missing requires presence. We hadn't been us for a while, and the person she missed was the man who absorbed disrespect, so she didn't have to feel its weight. I slept and dreamed about nothing, blessed blankness, and woke to Friday's clean line. I wore a simple shirt and a calm face to the attorney's office. She arrived a few minutes late in that navy blazer, clutching a water bottle like an alibi. The conference room smelled like paper and polite endings. The lawyer explained each page. She signed everything quickly until she reached the clause about marital waste and paused, eyes lifting to me like a dare. I didn't say a word. She signed. Pens clicked shut. The sound felt like a lid finding its jar. Outside the building, winter sunlight hit the glass hard and made the city look freshly inventoried. She walked beside me for half a block without speaking. At the curb, she finally tried one more story, a version where this was a cold streak and we were stronger than it. I told her I hoped she found the life she'd been dressing for. I didn't say his name. She did. It came out small and defensive and told me everything about how that chapter would end. Back at the yard, the guys were arguing about lunch spots. I chose a place I hadn't been to in years and ate alone in a booth that had known hundreds of conversations and forgotten them all. My phone buzzed with a single sentence from a friend who'd been rooting for reconciliation. Man, I didn't know. I typed back what felt truer than congratulations or condolences. Now we do. That evening, in the rental's quiet, I watched the light slide along the wall and settle behind the couch. No grief tsunami. Just the steady relief of being out of a game I never agreed to play. Her calls tapered, then stopped. The dog's Saturday slot arrived on schedule. He chased a tennis ball until his tongue curled at the edges, then flopped onto my shoes to remind me some loyalties are simple. On the way back, I drove past our old place and didn't slow down. The blinds were open. Someone moved through the kitchen I had aired out with truth. It looked smaller from the street, like most rooms do when you're no longer living in them. Finalization came by email first, then a stamped envelope that made it official without ceremony. The decree looked like every piece of paper that has ever ended something. Dense type, clean lines, signatures in ink that meant we would now walk different hallways. I read it once and put it in the same fireproof envelope that had ridden shotgun through the past few weeks. I made coffee and took the dog to the park for our Saturday slot. He found the same patch of sun he always likes and collapsed with a sigh that sounded like relief. Maybe it was mine. People kept expecting a breakdown or a speech. I've learned that endings make some folks itchy. They want tears or a villain to make sense of their own choices. What I had was simpler, a quiet certainty that I'd kept my word to myself. I changed my beneficiaries, updated the emergency contact at work, and removed her name from the doctor's forms that still had US linked by habit. I scrubbed a casserole dish in the rental's sink with more attention than the task deserved and realized that carefulness had stopped being a performance for someone else's comfort. It had become, strangely, a kind of respect for myself. She tried once more after the papers were signed. Not a plea, but a long, looping message that circled the idea of growth. How crises teach us. How couples who survive the winter get better springs. Half of it read like a podcast. The other half sounded like someone staring across a room that had gotten larger than she wanted. I don't fault her for learning late. I just don't enroll in classes I've outgrown. I've sat through enough trainings at work to know when refresher course is code for repeating what didn't land the first time. There were small shocks afterward. The first Sunday morning, I didn't have to time my grocery run around her schedule and realized the store is quiet at 9. The first evening I stood in a hardware aisle picking a drill bit and caught myself reaching for my phone to text her a question about wall anchors, then laughed because I already knew the answer. Even the silence changed shape. It stopped being the heavy kind you measure and hurt swallowed, and became the light kind you use to hear your own thoughts breathing. Mutual friends did their rounds. Some tested the water with diplomatic questions about what really happened. I told the truth in one sentence and let it rest on the table. A few looked down, the way people do when your answer doesn't give them a stage. One of her closest friends, surprising me, sent a short apology for not seeing what was obvious. I told her there was nothing to forgive. Seeing is hard when someone keeps shifting the light. A week later, I saw them together by accident. Not a movie moment with rain or shouting, just a red light on Spear and a patio 2 lanes over. He leaned back with that elbow over the chair posture I'd studied in Pixels. She smiled the way people smile when they're trying to prove to themselves they chose well. I felt nothing. The light changed, I made my right turn. The song on the radio kept playing like no one had given it the plot. Work settled into a better stride than I expected. With my head cleared, the stubborn bottleneck in Zone C finally loosened. The numbers shifted in our favor. The boss noticed without making a big deal. He asked once, in the careful voice manager's use, if I needed time. I said no, thanks, and meant it. Moving freight from A to B isn't glamorous, but it's honest. It reminds you that velocity without control is wreckage, and control without respect for the load is just another kind of mess. I'd learned the personal version of that lesson the hard way. Every so often a reflex flares. A joke I would have sent her from an aisle end cap. A song I would have pointed out on the drive home. They pass, and when they pass, something else has space to grow. I started taking longer runs on the Cherry Creek Trail, the kind that leave your lungs clean and your legs humming. I called my sister and actually listened when she talked about her kids instead of letting the phone fill the time. I bought 2 plants and didn't kill them. The rental stopped feeling like a waiting room and started feeling like a place you can read a book without bracing for the next test. I don't rewrite her in my head as a monster so I can stand taller. She made choices. So did I. I ignored a handful of early signs because steadiness loves a tidy story. When she drew a line where respect ended, I kept erasing it and drawing it back a few inches closer to myself. That's on me. Boundaries aren't walls you erect around someone else's behavior. They're the edges of what you will carry. When it got heavy in the way that breaks backs, I set it down. A friend asked me recently if I'd date again. The question made me smile because it assumes romance is an event you schedule after a cleanup. Maybe, maybe not. What I know is this. The next time, respect won't be a chapter we flip to during trouble. It'll be the spine that keeps the whole thing upright. I won't be counting attempts like a man tracking inventory he's afraid to lose. I'll be paying attention to how the room feels when I'm in it, and whether my presence is met like oxygen. You learn to tell the difference. I suppose there's a version of this story where we tried therapy, dragged our history into a room with a couch, and converted pain into acronyms. I don't sneer at that route. It helps some people build bridges where I chose to find a different shore. But bridges take 2 sets of hands and 1 shared map. I only ever had the first. When she told me, "Finally, you're learning," she meant my silence would train me to need less. She was right, just not in the way she imagined. I learned that the only thing worth negotiating in a life is time, and the only time worth surrendering is the part you share with someone who protects it like their own. Everything else is discounting inventory until the shelves are bare. On the last Saturday of my first month alone, the dog and I walked the long loop and stopped by a bakery I'd never noticed because for years I drove past it trying to get home fast. The woman behind the counter asked if I wanted the cinnamon roll warm. Yes, I did. We sat on the bench outside. He rested his head on my knee, eyes half closed, completely at peace with the world exactly as it was. I tore off a corner, too small to wreck him, big enough to make him happy. Sun on my face, sugar on my fingers, a day with no tests in it. Respect isn't negotiable. Turns out, neither is peace.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.